right, so you're a philosopher,
Mm.
which means grappling with big questions is kind of your thing.
Yeah.
Well, that's a job description, right?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Get ready for a deep dive into one of history's most radical thinkers,
Ooh, I like it already.
Baruch Spinoza.
One of my favorites.
We're exploring excerpts from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy's entry on Spinoza.
Sounds dense.
And let me tell you,
Okay.
his ideas are as challenging as they are fascinating.
Challenging is an understatement.
Really.
This guy,
Right.
he completely reinvented the philosophical playing field.
I've heard that.
It's not just that he challenged traditional views of God, the world, and ourselves.
Like a lot of philosophers do.
Right, like everybody.
Yeah.
He was tackling profound questions about the nature of reality, free will knowledge, and even what it means to live a good life in a way that was truly groundbreaking for his time.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah,
he was way ahead of his time.
absolutely.
So before we get into that mind-bending stuff...
Can we just talk about Spinoza the man?
Sure.
I mean...
The man, the myth, the legend.
He had a pretty unconventional life.
Unconventional, to say the least.
That is the understatement of the century.
Oh.
Imagine
Wow.
being a Jewish philosopher in 17th century Amsterdam and getting excommunicated
Whoa.
from your community for your views.
I mean, that's intense.
I mean, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
The details surrounding his excommunication are a bit murky.
Oh, really?
Like, we don't have...
I don't know exactly why.
Well, we have some ideas,
Okay.
but it's not entirely clear exactly what
Okay.
what the breaking point was.
Interesting.
But it speaks volumes about
Yeah.
how far his ideas pushed the boundaries of acceptable thought.
Like, he was really
Oh, yeah, he was way out there.
out there.
Yep.
So even after being ostracized, he just kept on philosophizing.
He did.
That takes some serious guts.
Serious guys.
Especially back then.
Oh, yeah. Back then, that
Yeah.
was a dangerous game.
Very dangerous game.
And what's even more remarkable,
What's that?
he never toned down his radicalism.
He just kept going.
He just kept going.
Doubled down.
He's like, nope,
Yeah.
this is what I think.
Yeah.
Deal with it.
Yeah.
He continued refining his philosophy,
Mm.
ultimately producing works like his masterpiece Ethics
Mm-hmm.
and the incredibly provocative theological political treatise.
Oh, I've heard of that one.
Have you heard about this one?
Okay.
One critic even called it a book forged in hell by the devil himself.
Wow. That's
Yeah,
quite a statement.
quite a statement.
So let's get into this hellfire philosophy.
Oh, yeah, let's do it.
One of the most famous and maybe infamous things about Spinoza is this concept of delicious signatra, God or nature.
Right.
I have to admit, this one I'm still wrestling with.
I know, it's a tough one.
How can those two things be the same?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
it takes some philosophical heavy lifting.
To really kind of wrap your head around this concept, and
Okay.
it goes to the heart of Spinoza's metaphysics.
Okay.
He's not simply saying that rocks, trees, and squirrels
Right.
are gods.
In the traditional sense.
No.
Pantheism.
Not quite pantheism.
Yeah.
So pantheism is the idea that God is everything.
Okay.
Spinoza is saying there's only one thing,
Okay.
and that one thing is God.
Got it.
And that one thing is nature.
Okay.
Everything that exists,
Mhm.
including us, is just a modification or
Okay.
expression of this single infinite substance.
So instead of a God separate from the world,
Mm-hmm.
Spinoza is saying that the world itself in its entirety
Yes.
is
Fine. You're getting the idea.
That's a radical.
That's radical,
for
huge
me.
departure from traditional theism.
Yeah,
This is where the forged in hell accusations come in,
I see it.
you know.
Yeah.
By identifying God with nature,
Mm-hmm.
Spinoza was essentially denying a transcendent personal God
Okay.
who intervenes in the world.
So no miracles.
Yeah, there's no, big guy in the sky
Right.
who's like, oh, I'm going to help you out with this, or I'm going
No.
to punish you for that.
No divine intervention.
Nope.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see how that could ruffle some feathers,
It ruffled a lot of feathers.
especially back then.
Oh, yeah.
But if we take Spinoza seriously,
Yeah. Yeah.
this has huge implications,
Yeah.
right?
Huge.
It challenges the whole notion of miracles, divine purpose,
Uh-huh.
and even free will.
All the big ones.
All the big ones.
Yeah, exactly. And this is where things get really interesting.
Okay, let's do it.
Especially for a philosopher, you see, if everything is just an expression of this one substance unfolding according to its own inherent laws,
Yeah.
then there's no room for a God who acts on whims or answers prayers.
Okay.
There's no special purpose for humanity.
Oh,
And there's no such thing as free will in the traditional sense.
hold on.
Okay.
No free will.
Yeah. This
As
is
a
your...
philosopher myself,
It's a big one.
I have to admit,
Right?
that's a tough pill to swallow.
No, it's hard.
Doesn't that undermine the whole basis of morality
Yeah.
and responsibility?
It throws a wrench in the works, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
big time.
Yeah.
So if we're essentially just cogs
Right.
in a giant cosmic machine,
Mm-hmm.
how can we be held responsible for our actions?
That's the question.
And what does it even mean to live a good life
Right.
if we're not really in control?
Yeah, those are excellent questions.
Yeah,
And
right.
they're at the heart of Spinoza's ethics.
Okay.
But before we get there,
All right.
we need to unpack another key piece of his philosophy,
Okay.
his concept of the human being.
All right, let's do it.
And this is where things get even more mind-bending.
Okay. All right, bring it on.
All right, buckle up.
Okay.
Spinoza believed that God has infinite attributes, infinite ways of being, essentially. But we humans,
Yeah.
with our limited cognitive abilities, can only grasp two of these attributes.
Okay.
Thought and extension.
Thought and extension.
Yeah.
So mind and body right.
Yeah.
I have a feeling
Yeah.
Spinoza's going to take this in a direction I don't expect.
He always does, doesn't he?
Always does.
That's why we love him.
Yeah.
So Spinoza's view of the human being is one of the most radical aspects of his philosophy.
Okay.
He's often labeled a materialist because he equates God with an extended thing,
Yeah.
nature.
Mm-hmm.
But he wasn't saying that God literally has a physical body like ours.
Okay.
He meant that extension.
Yeah.
The very essence of physical things
Mm-hmm.
is one of God's infinite attributes.
Okay, that's a key distinction.
It is.
So how does thought fit into this picture?
Right.
Is thought just another way of talking about the physical processes
Mhm.
in our brains?
That's where Spinoza really breaks away from the materialism of his time.
Okay.
He argued that thought
Yeah.
is not reducible to matter.
Okay.
It's its own distinct attribute of God,
Yeah.
just as fundamental as extension.
All right.
And here's the really mind-blowing part.
Okay.
He claimed that the human mind and the human body
Yeah.
are not two separate things interacting,
Uh,
but two different expressions or modes
oh.
of the same underlying substance,
Substance.
which is the individual person.
So you're saying that my mind and my body
Yes.
are both just modifications of the same stuff.
Yes.
That sounds a lot like monism,
Mm-hmm.
but with a Spinozistic twist.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Spinoza is often seen as a kind of radical monist.
Okay.
He completely rejects Cartesian dualism,
Right.
the idea that mind and body are separate substances that somehow interact.
Yeah, the interaction problem.
Right.
That's a big one.
For Spinoza,
Yeah.
there is no interaction problem.
he's phenomenal.
Because there's no duality to begin with.
Okay, so there's no problem to solve.
There's no problem to solve.
Mind and body
Yeah.
are like two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
Inseparable expressions of the same individual substance.
Exactly.
I'm trying to picture this. So everything that happens in my body
Hmm.
is mirrored in my mind and vice versa.
Yeah.
Because they're both just modifications of the same underlying reality.
You got it.
But if there's no actual interaction,
Right.
how do we experience things like pain? Is
Okay.
my body somehow sending signals to my mind?
This is where Spinoza gets really subtle.
Okay.
He argues that the mind doesn't perceive pain because it's being acted upon by the body.
Okay.
It perceives pain because it's the mind's own idea
Its own idea?
of what's happening in the body.
Okay.
The pain, the sensation, the awareness, it's
Yeah.
all happening within the same substance,
Okay.
expressed through two different attributes.
So it's like my mind is generating its own interpretation
Mhm.
of what my body is experiencing, and that interpretation is what we call pain.
You got it.
Almost like a kind of internal feedback loop
Yeah.
happening within this single substance.
Exactly. You're getting it.
Wow.
And this has profound implications
Yeah.
for how we understand the so-called mind-body problem.
Hmm.
Spinoza basically dissolved the problem
Okay.
by showing that there's no fundamental separation
Yeah.
between mind and body to begin with.
Okay. I have to admit.
Yeah.
That's a pretty elegant solution.
It's pretty radical,
It is radical.
but it kind of makes sense when you see how it fits into Spinoza's overall system.
Yeah.
But this brings us back
Yeah.
to the question of free will.
Right back to free will.
If mind and body are just modifications of this one substance,
Uh-huh.
unfolding according to deterministic laws,
Yeah.
how can we talk about making choices or being responsible for our actions?
Right.
That's where Spinoza's ethics come in.
Okay.
And it's where his philosophy gets really practical.
Practical.
And dare I say, even a bit optimistic.
Optimistic.
Yeah, a little bit.
Spinoza.
I know, right?
Okay.
But hear me out.
Okay.
He argues that even though we're not free in the sense of having ultimate control over our destiny, we can still achieve a kind of freedom through understanding.
Freedom through understanding.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I see how that works in a deterministic universe.
I know it's a bit of a head-scratcher.
Help me out here.
Okay, so for Spinoza, everything in nature, including us, has this inherent striving to persevere in its being.
To persevere.
Yeah, he calls it conatus.
Conatus.
It's a kind of fundamental drive for self-preservation and self-enhancement.
So everything wants to keep on keeping on.
Yes.
And to become even more of what it is.
Precisely.
Okay.
And this conatus is expressed through our affects.
Affects.
Which are basically our emotions and feelings.
Emotions,
right? Joy, for example, is an affect that increases our power of acting.
Okay.
While sadness decreases it.
Interesting.
Yeah. So our emotions are basically signals telling us whether we're succeeding or failing at this striving to persevere.
You could put it that way.
Yeah. And here's where the concept of freedom comes in.
Right.
Spinoza distinguishes between two types of affects.
Two types.
Active and passive.
Okay.
Passive affects are those emotions that are caused by external objects or forces acting upon us.
So it sounds a lot like the human condition most of the time.
It does, doesn't it? We're constantly being bombarded by things outside of ourselves.
So what are active effects?
Okay, so active effects.
And how do they relate to freedom?
They're the key to freedom.
Okay.
For Spinoza, active effects are those emotions that arise from our own understanding.
Our own understanding.
Yeah, they come from using our reason to grasp the nature of things, including our own nature.
So the more we understand,
the
less we're controlled by external objects and passion.
Exactly.
We become more self-determined, more capable of acting in accordance with our own nature.
Precisely.
So knowledge is power.
Knowledge is power.
In a very literal sense.
In a very Spinozistic sense. The more we understand, the more free we become.
I like it.
It's a very empowering idea.
It is.
Yeah.
For Spinoza, the ultimate good, the path to true freedom and happiness, is knowledge of God or nature.
Yes.
And remember for Spinoza that knowledge isn't just book learning.
No, it's not just reading Spinoza.
Right.
It's a deep, intuitive grasp of how everything is connected.
Okay.
How everything flows from the same divine source. It's a kind of understanding that transforms our entire being.
Okay, I'm starting to see how Spinoza's ethics connect to his metaphysics.
It's all connected, isn't it?
It is. It's all one.
Yeah.
But this idea of freedom through understanding raises another question.
Okay.
If everything is determined, even our thoughts and desires, how can we even talk about cultivating active effects?
Right.
Doesn't that imply
a
degree of choice that Spinoza seems to deny?
That's a very astute observation.
Thank you.
And it gets to the heart of a long-standing debate about Spinoza's philosophy.
A debate.
On the one hand, he seems to be saying that everything is predetermined.
Okay.
That there's no genuine freedom of choice.
Right.
But on the other hand, he talks about striving for understanding, about cultivating active effects, as if we have some agency in the matter.
Oh, which is it?
Well, there are different interpretations.
All right.
Some scholars argue that Spinoza is actually more of a compatibilist.
Compatibilist.
Meaning he believes that free will and determinism are compatible in some way.
Okay.
They point out that for Spinoza, even though our actions are ultimately determined by the chain of causes and effects, our actions can still be considered free if they flow from our own nature.
Our nature.
From our own understanding of what's good and true.
So it's not about having the power to choose differently in any given moment.
No.
But about aligning our actions with our deepest understanding of ourselves and the world.
Exactly. It's a subtle but important distinction. For Spinoza, genuine freedom isn't about being uncaused or acting randomly. It's about acting in accordance with our own nature. Which is ultimately a part of the divine nature.
So it's a kind of freedom within the constraints of necessity.
Yes.
A freedom that comes from aligning ourselves with the cosmic order.
You're getting the essence of it.
Okay.
And this brings us to another crucial aspect of Spinoza's ethics.
Hit me.
His concept of blessedness.
Blessedness, okay.
He argues that when we achieve this deep understanding of ourselves and the universe, when we're able to act in accordance with our true nature, we experience a kind of profound joy and fulfillment.
Joy and fulfillment.
That he calls blessedness.
Blessedness.
Yeah.
So blessedness isn't just about feeling good or having a lot of fun.
Not just hedonism.
It's about a deep sense of peace and harmony.
Yes.
That comes from living in accordance with reason and understanding.
Exactly. It's a state of being.
A state of being.
Where we're no longer tossed about by external forces and passions.
Right.
But are guided by our own inner compass.
Our inner compass.
By our own understanding of the good.
Sounds a lot like the Stoic idea of living in agreement with nature.
There are definite parallels there.
Yeah.
But for Spinoza, it goes even deeper.
Deeper.
It's not just about accepting what we can't control and focusing on what we can.
Right.
It's about a radical transformation of our understanding.
Right.
A shift from passion to action.
Passion to action.
From bondage to freedom.
Okay.
And this transformation is intimately connected to his views on knowledge.
Knowledge.
Which are just as groundbreaking as his metaphysics and ethics.
Okay, I'm ready to dive into Spinoza's epistemology.
All right, let's do it.
Let's see how he reshaped our understanding of what it means to know. Okay, so let's unravel this Spinozan epistemology.
All right, let's do it.
His theory of knowledge is as unique as his views on substance and ethics.
It really is. He's got a very distinct approach to epistemology.
So break it down for me.
Okay.
What are the different ways that Spinoza believes we can know things?
So Spinoza believed there are 3 distinct kinds of knowledge.
Okay, 3.
3.
Lay them on me.
Okay, so we've got knowledge from random experience.
Okay, random experience.
Reason and intuition.
Okay, so let's start with knowledge from random experience.
Yeah. What is that?
What is that?
Well, it's the kind of knowledge that we derive from our senses and perceptions.
Okay.
It's often unreliable and incomplete.
Unreliable.
Yeah, I mean...
Our senses can deceive us.
Our senses deceive us all the time.
Right.
Like, think about optical illusions or, you know, just...
Or even from art.
Or the way that we misinterpret things that we see or hear.
Right, like, I think something's moving in the corner of my eye.
Right.
But it's just like the wind or something.
Exactly.
Okay.
So it gives us only a fragmented understanding of reality.
Fragmented.
Yeah, it's like seeing a shadow and mistaking it for the object itself. We're getting a limited, distorted view.
A limited view.
Okay. It's through reason. That we move beyond these mere appearances.
So reason helps us.
Reason helps us connect the dots.
To see a fuller picture.
To see the fuller picture, yeah. And it allows us to understand the essences of things.
Essence.
Yeah, through a process of logical deduction and inference.
So through reason, we can see not just that things exist.
Yes.
But also why they exist.
Why they exist and how they came to be.
And how they fit into the grand scheme of things.
Okay.
We see them in their causal and conceptual connections to everything else in the universe.
So give me an example of how reason helps us move beyond that sensory experience.
Certainly. Let's take the classic example of the sun.
The sun.
Through our senses, the sun might appear small, like a golden disk moving across the sky. But through reason, we understand that the sun is actually an enormous star millions of miles away.
Right.
And the reason it appears small is because of its distance and our perspective.
Yeah.
Perspective, exactly.
Yeah. We've used reason to arrive at a truer understanding of the sun's nature.
A truer understanding. Okay.
Yeah.
So we've got knowledge from random experience. We've got reason.
Right.
Where does intuition fit into all of this?
Okay, so intuition.
Yeah.
This is the highest form of knowledge for Spinoza.
The highest.
Yeah. It's not simply a different way of reasoning.
Okay.
But a direct and immediate grasp of truth.
Okay.
Almost like a flash of insight or a sudden illumination.
So if reason is like connecting the dots, intuition is like seeing the whole picture at once.
Yes, that's a great way to put it.
In an instant.
Yeah, it builds upon what we know through reason.
Okay.
But takes us to a deeper level of understanding.
Deeper.
Yeah, a kind of direct apprehension of the nature of reality.
Okay.
And here's what's truly remarkable.
Okay.
Spinoza believed that through reason and intuition, we can achieve an adequate knowledge of God.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Didn't he say that God is infinite?
He did.
Beyond our comprehension.
Yes, he did.
How can we possibly have knowledge?
That's the paradox, isn't it?
Yeah.
But what makes Spinoza so radical and so fascinating is that he doesn't see this as a barrier to knowledge.
Okay.
He believed that because we are expressions of God or nature, our minds are capable of reflecting the divine intellect.
Okay.
Through reason and intuition, we can progressively come to know God's attributes, understand the laws of nature, and grasp our place in the grand scheme of things.
That's an incredibly optimistic view.
It is.
Of human cognition.
It's a very empowering view.
It is.
Of what we're capable of.
So even though we're finite beings
in
a deterministic universe, we're not cut off from the infinite.
That's part of it. We're part of it.
We're like little drops of water in the vast ocean of God or nature.
We can still access this deep well of knowledge and understanding.
Absolutely. And this brings us back to Spinoza's ethics.
Okay.
And the concept of freedom. The more we understand, the more we free ourselves from the tyranny of passions.
Okay.
The more we act in accordance with our true nature, and ultimately, the more we experience that blessedness that Spinoza talked about.
It all comes full circle.
It does. It's all interconnected. It's a beautiful system.
So Spinoza, the radical metaphysician, also turns out to be...
He wears many hats.
Spinoza, the champion of individual liberty.
He does. He's a very complex thinker.
Very complex thinker.
Yeah, but at the heart of it is this deep belief in the power of reason and understanding.
It's a powerful message.
It is.
I think that's a great place to wrap up our deep dive.
I agree.
Into the philosophy of Baruch Spinoza.
It's been a journey.
It's been quite a journey.
Yeah.
Challenging.
Definitely challenging.
Mind-bending.
Mind-bending.
But ultimately, I think, very rewarding.
I agree.
So, to our listeners out there, keep diving deep.
Keep those philosophical gears turning.
And we'll see you next time.